I'm Nora Bennett, 34 years old and the mom of 2 kids who mean the world to me. Lucas, my creative 11-year-old who never goes anywhere without his sketchbook, and Mia, my 9-year-old who has been begging me for violin lessons since she could talk. 2 years ago, when my marriage fell apart in ways I still can't fully talk about without choking up, I packed whatever I could fit in my Honda Civic and drove straight to my parents' house in Denver. At the time, it felt like the only lifeline I had. Working back-to-back 12-hour shifts in the ER doesn't leave much room for childcare, and when my parents said, "Come home until you get back on your feet," I told myself it was a blessing. For a little while, it even felt that way. My mom cooked warm meals. My dad helped with school pickups when my shifts ran late, and the kids had their grandparents cheering them on at soccer games and spelling bees. But deep down, I knew I was walking on a cracked floor. My parents and I had always carried a complicated history, one where I was the dependable daughter who never asked for much, while my younger brother Tyler was the golden boy who could do no wrong. Still, I wanted to believe this time was different. I kept telling myself, just focus on saving money, Nora. Don't stir the pot. I taped a moving fun chart to my bathroom mirror so Lucas and Mia could color in the squares each time we managed to put $20 aside. It became our quiet little game. Every colored box was hope that one day we'd have our own front door again. But hope doesn't protect you from reality. Things started to shift the moment Tyler and his wife Kelsey had their baby boy Mason. Suddenly, my kids, the same kids who had been the center of their grandparents' lives for nearly a decade, were treated like they had faded into the wallpaper. My parents transformed the dining room into a fully furnished nursery for Mason, even though Tyler and Kelsey lived in a 4-bedroom house across town. Expensive cribs, a white noise machine that cost more than my entire week's groceries, designer curtains, all installed in a house Mason would only visit. And just like that, Lucas and Mia's laughter in the living room was met with, "Keep it down, the baby might come over." Their drawings disappeared from the fridge, replaced by glossy milestone photos of Mason's first smile, first bath, first everything. I watched my kids' faces each time they noticed the swap. They didn't say much, but kids don't need words to feel when they're being pushed aside. I never thought I would see the day when my own parents, people who once told me they'd die for their grandchildren, would make my children invisible right in front of me. That kind of betrayal doesn't hit like a punch. It's quieter. It seeps into bedtime when Lucas whispers, "Why don't Grandma and Grandpa clap for me anymore?" Or when Mia tucks her violin away before finishing her song because Grandma looks tired. If you've ever felt like a guest in your own family's home, I promise you'll understand every word of what I'm about to share. And if this story already hits close to home, drop a comment about where you're watching from and make sure to subscribe. This channel is all about real-life family drama, and your support keeps these stories alive. Because what happened next in my life? It turned everything upside down. The first real crack appeared on Mia's 9th birthday. We'd kept it simple. Balloons from the dollar store, a homemade chocolate cake with pink sprinkles, and the Barbie violin she'd been dreaming about. Her eyes lit up like fireworks when she opened it, bowing a squeaky tune right there in the living room. But not even 15 minutes later, my parents walked in carrying a gigantic wrapped box. It wasn't for her. It was for Mason. He's only turning 6 months, but we wanted him to have this early, my mom explained, beaming as they unveiled a state-of-the-art stroller with cup holders, storage bins, and tires that looked like they could climb a mountain. The price tag was still dangling off the handle, $500. I swear I felt Mia's excitement shrivel inside her. She tried to smile, whispering, "It's okay, Mom." But I saw the way she put her Barbie back into its box as if it suddenly didn't matter. 2 weeks later, Lucas came home from school grinning wider than I'd seen in months. He'd been selected to represent his class in the district's art showcase. He rushed straight to the kitchen, eager to show his grandparents the flyer. My dad barely glanced up from his laptop. "That's nice, son," he muttered before turning his attention back to Tyler, who was scrolling Pinterest with Kelsey, debating curtain colors for the nursery. Lucas folded the flyer into a neat square and tucked it into his sketchbook without another word. That night, I found him in his room tracing the flyer with a pencil, over and over, like he was trying to convince himself it still meant something. And then came Sunday dinner. My mom had gone all out: pot roast, mashed potatoes, Tyler's favorite apple pie. The table was dressed like Thanksgiving in October. Halfway through the meal, Lucas leaned toward me and whispered, "Mom, could I maybe have a sandwich instead? I don't like pot roast." I told him to ask politely, and he did. My mother's face hardened instantly. "When I was a kid, we ate what was put in front of us," she scolded. "You're being ungrateful." The words stung. Lucas looked down, cheeks flaming red, and stabbed his fork into a pile of potatoes he clearly didn't want. Not 5 minutes later, Mason hurled his bowl of mashed carrots straight onto the floor, splattering orange across the hardwood. Everyone laughed. "He's just exploring his world," Kelsey said sweetly, not even bothering to pick it up. My dad chuckled. "That's my grandson. Strong arm already." I wanted to scream. The double standard was suffocating. By the end of that night, I couldn't ignore the pattern anymore. The fridge was plastered with Mason's ultrasound prints and First Foods calendar, while Lucas's artwork had quietly disappeared. Mia's violin case gathered dust under her bed because every time she practiced, someone claimed it was too loud for the baby. My children, once cherished, had become background noise in their own home. At work, I carried the weight of it in my bones. One night during a brutal ER shift, my colleague Maria caught me staring blankly at the charting screen. "You okay?" she asked. That simple question cracked me open. Words poured out. Every slight, every time my kids were dismissed, every laugh that came at their expense. Maria listened, her eyes fierce. "Nora, they've made your brother's family the guests of honor, and you and your kids the inconvenient roommates. That's not a home. That's a hotel where you're paying rent without a key." Her words cut deep because they were true. That night, instead of driving straight home, I sat in the hospital parking lot with my engine running and my hands gripping the wheel so tight they hurt. I replayed Mia's small voice saying, "It's okay, Mom," and Lucas's quiet folding of his art flyer. I thought about all the colored squares on our bathroom chart, each one filled in with hope. It hit me then. My kids were learning to settle, to shrink themselves, to accept crumbs while someone else feasted at the table. That was not the lesson I wanted them to carry into adulthood. So I started writing things down. Every expense I covered, every chore I did, every time my kids were silenced or brushed aside. Not for confrontation, at least not yet, but to remind myself that I wasn't imagining it. And maybe, just maybe, to prepare for the day I'd finally need to prove to them and to myself that we deserved better. I promised Lucas and Mia one thing before bed that night. "A few more months," I whispered. "By Christmas, we'll have our own place. Just hold on." They nodded, clinging to my words like life rafts. But deep down, I wasn't sure if I could stretch my patience that far, because something told me the storm in our house was only just beginning. When you live with small humiliations long enough, they almost start to feel normal. Almost. But then someone from the outside sees it clearly, and suddenly you can't unsee it either. It was my Aunt Carolyn, the one relative who never sugarcoated things, who finally snapped me awake. She came over for dinner one Saturday night. We were all sitting at the table, Mason in his high chair at the head, as though he were the honored guest at a banquet. Lucas had quietly set one of his new sketches by my mom's place setting, hoping she'd notice. She didn't. Instead, she launched into a glowing monologue about how advanced Mason was, how he's already babbling like he's a year old. Halfway through, Lucas pushed his plate away. "I'm not hungry," he mumbled. Aunt Caroline's sharp eyes caught the whole exchange. Later, when I was walking her out to her car, she put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Honey, you know you're not imagining this, right? They're treating your kids like second-class citizens in their own home." The words burned, but they also felt like oxygen. I thought maybe I was just being oversensitive, I admitted, my throat tight. Caroline shook her head. "No, you've been the dependable one your whole life, Nora. They lean on you, but they don't see you, and it's not fair to Lucas and Mia. You need a plan." A plan. The word rang in my ears like a bell. That night, I sat at the tiny desk in my room, lit only by a flickering lamp. I opened my laptop and started researching rental properties near the hospital. My savings chart in the bathroom already showed progress. We had colored in 32 squares. Not enough for a house, but maybe enough for a modest apartment if I played my cards right. The next morning, between packing lunches and herding the kids to school, I slipped in a phone call to a property manager. By my lunch break at the ER, I was standing in a small but clean 3-bedroom rental in Lakewood. It wasn't fancy. The carpet was worn. The kitchen cabinets were outdated, but the windows let in sunlight, and there was a little fenced yard where Mia could practice soccer drills and Lucas could spread his art supplies without being told to move. For the first time in months, I let myself imagine what peace could look like. "Rent's $1,500, the landlord told me. My stomach sank. It was steep, but then he added, "With your credit history and steady job, you're pre-approved. I just need the deposit by the end of next month." I nodded, forcing myself to stay calm even though my heart was racing. "I'll make it happen." That night, I told Lucas and Mia we were going on a secret adventure. We sat cross-legged on my bed, and I showed them the photos I'd snapped on my phone. The little kitchen, the backyard, the bright corner where I could already see Mia's violin stand. Their eyes widened with cautious hope. Is that for us?" Lucas asked, like he didn't quite dare to believe. I smiled. "If we keep saving and I keep working extra shifts, yes, it could be." Mia leaned against me, whispering, "Can we put the chart squares in faster now?" I kissed her hair and said, "That's the plan." From then on, every dollar had a purpose. I took extra PRN shifts whenever they came available, even if it meant collapsing into bed at dawn. I started packing homemade lunches for myself instead of grabbing takeout, clipping coupons, even selling old nursing textbooks I didn't need. Each small sacrifice was another colored box filled in. Meanwhile, at home, the slights continued. My mother scolded Mia for bothering the baby when she practiced scales, though Mason wasn't even in the room. Tyler bragged about a new gaming system he'd bought while I was counting quarters at the grocery store. My dad muttered about how expensive Lucas's inhalers were, right before offering to cover part of Mason's daycare fees. Each jab made me angrier, but instead of exploding, I funneled that anger into fuel. And then there was Maria. She had been my rock at the ER for years, the one person who could read my exhaustion from across the room. One night after a grueling shift, she pulled me aside. "I've got a spare bedroom," she said quietly. "If you ever need a safe place to land while you transition, it's yours." The offer floored me. "You mean it?" I asked, barely able to keep my voice steady. She nodded. "No strings. You and the kids deserve better than what you've been living with." That night, for the first time in a long while, I didn't cry myself to sleep. I lay awake instead, staring at the ceiling, mapping out the timeline in my head. If I worked every shift I could grab, I'd have the deposit by late October. The house would be ready for us by November 1st. I whispered into the dark like a prayer. Just a few more weeks. Hold on. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was planning, preparing, building the scaffolding of a life where my kids could breathe again. They didn't know it yet, but the days of tiptoeing around someone else's golden child were numbered. The closer I got to freedom, the heavier the chains in that house seemed to feel. It was like the universe was testing just how badly I wanted out. It started when Tyler and Kelsey announced they were temporarily moving back in during their big home renovation. We were all sitting in the living room when Tyler made his grand speech, waving around floor plans like a proud architect. "The contractor says it'll only be 6 to 8 weeks, he said. My dad clapped him on the back. "You'll stay here, of course. This is your home, too." My stomach dropped. We were already stacked on top of each other, me and the kids crammed into the small guest room, Lucas and Mia sharing bunk beds that squeaked every time they rolled over. "Actually, space is already tight," I started carefully. My mom shot me a look sharp enough to cut glass. "Family helps family, Nora. Don't be selfish." And just like that, my opinion didn't matter. Within a week, Tyler and Kelsey had taken over the biggest upstairs bedroom. My mom happily transformed it into a nursery office combo for Kelsey's remote job. She even bought new curtains and painted the walls a cheerful mint green. Meanwhile, my kids were shoved into the smallest upstairs room, barely big enough for 2 twin beds and a dresser. Their toys were boxed up and shoved in the basement to make space. The rules multiplied overnight. Mia couldn't practice violin in the afternoons because the baby is napping. Lucas was told to keep his robotics project out of the living room because it looked messy. Even their laughter in the hallway was shushed. One evening, after a 12-hour ER shift, I walked in to find Mia sitting on the stairs, her violin case shut tight beside her. "Grandma says I have to stop. Mason's sleeping." She whispered it like a confession, but I could hear Mason giggling in the nursery, wide awake. Lucas wasn't faring any better. He had saved up allowance to buy a robotics kit, and for once, he was excited about something that had nothing to do with school. But when parts spilled across the coffee table, Kelsey frowned. "This isn't a workshop, Lucas. Pack it up." The worst sting came when I spotted a brand new $450 high chair in the kitchen, gleaming like a throne. The same week, my dad had told me, "Nora, you really need to control Lucas's medication costs. Inhalers are expensive." As if I wasn't the one already paying for every prescription, every copay, every dime of my kid's needs. I bit my tongue so hard it hurt. Anger was rising in me like boiling water, but I couldn't let it spill over. Not yet. Not when we were just weeks away from moving into our own place. One night, I tried to reason with them. I sat Tyler and Kelsey down at the table. "Look, I get that the baby needs rest and you need quiet for work, but maybe we can come up with a schedule so Mia can practice and Lucas can have some space for his project." Kelsey didn't even look up from her laptop. "My work calls and Mason's naps have to take priority. Your kids can do their hobbies anytime." Hobbies. The word stung. To Mia, that violin was her dream. To Lucas, that robot was his pride. But to Kelsey, they were inconveniences. I swallowed the retort burning in my throat. "Fine," I said, my voice flat. That night, I lay awake in the squeaky bunk bed, listening to Mia's soft breathing above me and Lucas tossing restlessly below. I stared at the ceiling and reminded myself, just a few more weeks. Hold on, don't blow it now. In secret, I signed the final lease papers for the Lakewood house. November 1st was the official move-in date. The landlord agreed to let me pick up the keys early if the deposit cleared. I circled the date in red on my calendar and tucked the papers into a folder labeled Hope. But every day under that roof felt like a new test of endurance. The tension was thick, the favoritism louder than ever. And though I held my tongue for my kids' sake, I could feel something inside me coiling tighter, waiting for the moment when I couldn't stay silent anymore. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of ordinary day that blindsides you when it explodes into something unforgettable. I was midway through a 12-hour ER shift when my phone buzzed nonstop in my pocket. At first, I ignored it. We were short-staffed, and I had a patient coding. But when I finally stepped into the break room and glanced at my screen, my heart clenched. Missed texts, dozens of them. From Lucas, "Mom, Grandpa, and Uncle Tyler are moving our stuff. Please come home." From Mia, "Grandma says we have to sleep in the basement. It smells gross. I don't want to." From Lucas again, "They said Mason needs the good rooms more. Mom, please." I felt my chest cave in. The basement. The unfinished, damp basement where I'd once caught spiders the size of silver dollars. My son had asthma, and they had shoved his things down there like he was baggage. I begged my supervisor for an early leave, explaining it was an emergency. She didn't hesitate. "Go, Nora. We've got it covered." Still, every red light on the drive home felt like a punishment, every minute like an hour. When I walked through the front door, I found my kids huddled on the couch, backpacks clutched to their chests. Lucas's eyes were rimmed red, and Mia's cheeks were streaked with tears. My mom sat in the kitchen sipping tea with Kelsey, as if nothing was unusual. Tyler and my dad were nowhere in sight. "What's going on?" My voice was sharp enough to slice the air. Mia bolted into my arms. "They moved our beds downstairs, Mom. They said Mason deserves the rooms because he's here all day." I felt something inside me snap, not in chaos, but in a strange, terrifying calm. I kissed the top of her head, set my jaw, and walked into the kitchen. "Why?" I asked evenly. Are my children's belongings in the basement? My mom didn't flinch. It's the logical solution. Mason needs space to grow, and Kelsey needs a home office. Lucas and Mia are older. They can adapt. Adapt? I repeated. To mold? To damp walls? To a single window that doesn't even open? Lucas has asthma, Mom. She waved me off. You're being dramatic. We laid down some old carpet and put in extra lights. They should be grateful they have a place to stay at all. Grateful. The word ricocheted in my skull. Kelsey set her teacup down with a clink. Look, Nora, it's not personal. It's just practical. My work and Mason's development take priority. Your kids will be fine. I turned to her, still calm, but with steel in my voice. Would you call it fine if someone shoved Mason into a basement against your wishes? Her lips parted, but no sound came out. That's when my dad and Tyler came in through the back door, their faces flushed with the self-satisfaction of men who thought they'd solved a puzzle. Good, you're home, my dad said briskly. We needed to make adjustments, and it's already done. Don't make a scene. A scene. That's all I was to them, an inconvenient woman prone to overreacting. I walked back into the living room where Lucas and Mia were waiting, their eyes wide and searching. And in that moment, everything crystallized. All the nights I'd bitten my tongue, all the times I told them to just hold on a little longer, it led here. I crouched in front of them, took their hands, and smiled. A real smile. Pack your bags. Lucas blinked. What? Pack what matters most to you. Clothes, school stuff, your treasures. We'll come back for the rest later. We're leaving. My dad's voice thundered behind me. For heaven's sake, Nora, stop this nonsense. No one asked you to leave. I stood, still holding my children's hands. You didn't have to. You made it clear enough where we stand. The house erupted then. My mom wailing about betrayal, Tyler insisting I was overreacting, Kelsey scoffing about me being oversensitive. But none of it mattered. Lucas and Mia bolted upstairs to pack, and I followed, ignoring the storm of voices below. When they came down with their backpacks, Lucas clutching his sketchbook and Mia holding her violin case, my mother gasped like she was watching a funeral. You cannot be serious. You'll regret this. I met her eyes with a calm I didn't know I possessed. No, Mom. What I regret is staying long enough for my kids to think this was normal. Tyler smirked, his last desperate jab. Where will you even go? You've got no money, Nora. You'll be back in a week. And that was when I delivered the blow I'd been holding close to my chest. That's where you're wrong. I've been saving since the day I moved back, working double shifts. And 3 weeks ago, I signed a lease on a house. The deposit clears Friday. The silence that followed was delicious. My dad's face turned crimson. My mom clutched her chest, and Tyler looked like I'd slapped him. You went behind our backs? My mother whispered. I nodded. No, Mom, I went forward, for my kids. With that, I shepherded Lucas and Mia out to the car. They climbed in, their little bodies shaking with adrenaline, but their eyes brighter than I'd seen in months. My dad barked one final threat from the porch. If you walk out that door, don't expect to come back. I turned, my hand on the car door, and said softly, I stopped expecting that a long time ago. The tires crunched on the gravel as we pulled away. In the rearview mirror, I saw my parents, Tyler and Kelsey, standing on the porch, stunned statues in the glow of the porch light. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel small under their gaze. I felt free. Lucas leaned forward from the back seat. "Mom, are we really going to our own house?" "Not tonight," I said, my throat tight with tears I refused to shed. "But soon. Tonight we're staying with a friend. And after that?" "Yes, our own house." Mia clutched her violin like it was a lifeline. "So, we don't have to go back?" I reached for her hand. "No, baby, we never have to go back." And with those words, the weight that had been pressing on my chest for 2 years finally lifted. For the first time, I could breathe. The morning after we left, I woke up in my friend Maria's guest room with both kids curled against me like they had when they were toddlers. For a moment, I thought it had all been a dream. The shouting, the basement, the bags. But then Lucas stirred, clutching his sketchbook, and Mia whispered, "Do we have to go back today?" "No, sweetheart," I said, kissing her forehead. "We're not going back. Not like before." Maria had laid out pancakes and orange juice for us, like it was some sort of celebration. She hugged me tight in the kitchen. "You did the right thing, Nora. Don't let anyone make you second-guess that." Doh! But second-guessing was exactly what my parents tried to force on me. My phone blew up that day with texts ranging from angry accusations to guilt-drenched pleas. "After all we've done for you, you're tearing this family apart. We only wanted the best for Mason. Why can't you understand?" I didn't reply. Not yet. I needed space to breathe. 2 days later, I drove back to gather the rest of our belongings. I didn't go alone. Maria insisted on coming with her husband, just in case. The moment I stepped inside, I could feel the tension radiating. My dad's jaw was clenched, my mom's eyes puffy from crying. Tyler and Kelsey conveniently weren't there. "So," my father said, arms crossed, "come to apologize?" I shook my head calmly. "No, I came to pack the rest of my children's things." My mother's lip trembled. "We gave you everything, Nora. A roof when you had nothing. Help with the kids, and you repay us by running off in the middle of the night?" I sighed. I was grateful, but grateful doesn't mean blind. You told my children they didn't deserve the same space or respect as their cousin. You moved them into a damp basement without asking me. That's not help, Mom. That's harm. For once, she had no response. As we carried suitcases and boxes out to the car, Lucas tugged on my sleeve. "Mom, can I leave the robot parts here? They'll just get mad again." I crouched down and met his eyes. "No, buddy. We take everything that belongs to you. Your art, your robot, your dreams. They come with us." He nodded slowly, a flicker of pride warming his expression. When we finished, I stood in the living room one last time, the walls lined with Mason's baby photos, every trace of my kids erased. My dad muttered as I reached for the doorknob, "This is a mistake. You're letting your pride ruin their future." I turned, my voice steady. "No, Dad, for the first time, I'm protecting their future." We left, the door clicking shut behind us like the closing of a chapter. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. The landlord approved my deposit early, and by November 1st, we were standing inside our own rental house in Lakewood. The carpet was thin, the paint a little chipped, but to us it was a palace. Mia ran from room to room, shouting, "This one's mine!" Lucas pressed his sketchbook against the sunlit wall, grinning. That first night, after we ate pizza on the floor, the kids curled up in their own beds for the first time in nearly 2 years. I sat alone in the living room and cried, not from regret, but from relief. Meanwhile, the cracks in my parents' perfect picture started to show. Without me cooking, cleaning, and handling school pickups, they struggled under the weight of Tyler and Kelsey's chaos. My mom confided during a strained phone call weeks later that she was exhausted from chasing Mason and barely keeping the house together. Tyler and Kelsey's renovation dragged on months past schedule. Bleeding money. I heard through Aunt Carolyn that the constant stress had them snapping at each other daily. For the first time, my parents saw what it meant to coddle the golden child without a safety net to lean on. And yet, even with their hardship, they couldn't undo what had already happened. Lucas and Mia blossomed away from their grandparents' shadow. Lucas's grades improved. His art teacher called him fearlessly creative again. Mia practiced violin every night, filling the house with imperfect, beautiful music no one dared to shush. When I tucked them in one night, Mia looked up at me and whispered, "Mom, it feels like we matter again." Those words cut deeper than any insult my parents had ever thrown, because they revealed the wound my kids had been carrying all along. And they reminded me why walking away had been the only choice. 6 months after we carried those backpacks out of my parents' house, life felt unrecognizable, lighter, steadier hours. The little rental in Lakewood had become more than walls and a roof. It had become a sanctuary. The fridge was cluttered with Lucas's sketches and Mia's recital programs, not erased for someone else's convenience. The living room echoed with violin scales and laughter, not constant shushing. The backyard, small as it was, sprouted wildflowers Mia had planted in recycled yogurt cups. And me? I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building. The promotion I'd quietly worked toward at the hospital finally came through. Charge nurse on the pediatric floor. The pay bump wasn't just numbers on a paycheck, it was freedom. For the first time since the divorce, I didn't panic when the car needed repairs or when Lucas's inhaler copay came due. I even started a savings account labeled Home Sweet Home. Not just a dream this time, but a plan. Of course, my parents weren't gone from our lives entirely. After weeks of silence, my mother started reaching out. Soft at first, almost hesitant. "How are the kids?" she'd ask over the phone, her voice missing its usual edge. When we agreed to attend a Sunday dinner, it was different. The favoritism hadn't disappeared overnight, but there was an awareness in her eyes I hadn't seen before. My dad still bristled, still insisted he had only done what was practical, but even he looked tired of pretending the old ways had worked. Lucas, always observant, noticed too. One evening after dinner at their place, he leaned against me in the car and whispered, "Grandpa didn't yell this time. Do you think they're trying?" I smiled faintly. Maybe. People can change when they really want to. But here's the thing. I no longer needed them to change for us to be okay. The power they once had over me, the weight of their approval or disapproval, was gone. The real transformation, though, was in my kids. Lucas joined an after-school art program, and his teacher said his imagination was exploding with confidence. He even won a regional contest, proudly holding up his ribbon like it was Olympic gold. Mia made the advanced orchestra at school and started talking about trying out for soccer in the spring. She practiced daily in her own room, bow against string, her music soaring through the house like a declaration. I exist. I matter. One night, while we sat on the floor putting together a puzzle, Mia asked quietly, "Mom, Why did Grandma and Grandpa treat us different from Mason? I took a breath, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes people get stuck in old patterns. They thought Uncle Tyler needed more, and they forgot to see how special you and Lucas are. It wasn't fair, but it wasn't your fault. Lucas looked up from his piece. Is that why we left? Yes, I said firmly, because everyone deserves to be treated with respect. And when that doesn't happen, we have to choose better for ourselves. They nodded, and the conversation drifted back to the puzzle, but I could tell they were processing it in a way that would shape who they became. They were learning the lesson I hadn't understood until adulthood. Sometimes the bravest love you can show your family is walking away. In April, another door opened. A modest 3-bedroom house went up for sale just 10 minutes from the hospital, within our school district. It wasn't glamorous, faded shutters, and outdated kitchen, but it was solid, safe, and within reach thanks to my promotion and savings. I put in an offer, heart in my throat, and 2 weeks later, I held the keys in my hand. The day I showed Lucas and Mia, they screamed with joy. Lucas immediately claimed the smallest bedroom, declaring it his art studio. Mia wanted the one with the big window for her violin practice. "Can we paint the door red?" she asked, her eyes shining. "We can paint it any color you want." I laughed. That night, sitting on the floor of our empty living room, I thought about the day my father had sneered that I couldn't make it without them, about my mother's words that my kids should adapt, and I realized those words had become the fuel that pushed me here, to independence, to pride, to a home filled with our laughter instead of their rules. When we finally moved in, friends and coworkers came to help, lugging boxes and sharing pizza just like before. My parents even stopped by later that evening, quieter than usual. My father looked around, his eyes softer than I expected. "This is a good home," he admitted grudgingly. My mother touched my arm and whispered, "You've done well." For once, I didn't feel like I was chasing their approval. I simply nodded. Yes, I have. Looking back, what felt like betrayal had actually been the beginning. The night I told my kids to pack your bags, I thought I was ending something. In reality, I was beginning everything. Our freedom, our dignity, our real family. Because family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about respect. It's about kindness that doesn't waver when things get hard. It's about making space for each other's dreams, whether that's a sketchbook, a violin, or simply the right to breathe. So if you're listening to this and you've ever felt small in your own family or silenced or made to believe you're less, please hear me. You are not less. You deserve to stand tall. And sometimes the bravest, most loving thing you can do is pack your bags and build the life you and your children deserve.